Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me thank you for being here. The stories on this podcast are meant to let you know that you're not alone in what you're going through and that we can all find strength in struggle with the right perspective. If you've been enjoying the podcast, let me ask that you leave a review on your platform of choice to help us grow so that we can continue to make the world a better place, one conversation at a time. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 190. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and in Boston, Massachusetts, we have a very, very special guest, Callum Cobb. Callum, how are you?
Good, thanks, Joe, and thank you for having me.
Of course, it's my pleasure. We got connected through another podcast guest and one of the best human beings that I know, Dan Stoddard. And I figured it would be cool to maybe start with, how do you know Dan? And then go into introducing yourself to those who don't know who you are, Callum.
Yeah, definitely. I met Dan pre-COVID, which feels like a different lifetime ago. We would get together when he lived in Boston to go for some weekend runs, which was always great. And yeah, kind of feels strange to feel that we met before COVID and the world changed.
It feels like it was so long ago and also just the other day. And I was talking to somebody at the gym yesterday. I find it so funny that I used to go on runs back in the early days of the pandemic with a mask, just in case I passed someone who was, 20 feet away from me. It was etiquette to put the mask up. And it's so bizarre to think about that.
Yeah, it's kind of like normal for us, but to think that generations from now they'll learn about this plague that struck the world, every corner of the world, and we just kind of, take it for granted. Yeah,
Yeah.
bizarre times.
So with that being said, Callum, for people listening who don't know who you are, how would you introduce yourself?
Ooh, it's a tough one. I think just a guy that was probably quite recently dealt a relatively tricky, I guess, hand of cards, and just trying to learn to dance in the rain a little bit. Certainly not somebody that can say I've got all of these, wonderful accomplishments behind me or anything like that. But I think I summarized it in the sense that just trying to work through a difficult situation.
And that's the reason why we're talking. And I'm so excited to have this conversation because when you and I connected on the phone and I got to hear a bit more about your story, it was both emotional and sad and inspiring and encouraging. It was all of the things. And, I think that's a testament to how you've chosen to walk through it. And so without, laboring this on, I'll just get right to the first question of the podcast because it'll lead us into the heart of your story. So when you look at your life as a whole, Callum, up until this point, what has been the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle that you did not get to choose for yourself?
Yeah, I think prior to last year, I probably would have had to think quite long and hard about answering that question, but it's crystal clear to me now, unfortunately. So I think to share some context, in my 20s, both of my parents were diagnosed with cancer. And last year, after just a 9-month diagnosis, so, when I say 9-month diagnosis, 9 months prior, life is just completely normal. My mum passed away with a quite rare form of mutative lung cancer. So I guess, that particular situation was almost unfathomable for me at the time to be in a situation where I remember being on a flight from Boston Logan Airport to London, and that flight's about 6 hours, 5 or 6 hours, and to just think like, is she gonna hang on? That was the longest 6 hours of my life. Just to sort of share some perspective there, that was kind of how abruptly everything happened. So I would say that that whole situation and all of the aftermath and ripple effects of that has definitely been the hardest thing to handle, that I didn't get to choose for myself.
Yeah. I would love to hear if you're open to sharing a little bit more context about the relationship that you had with both of your parents, maybe before all of this unfolded.
Yeah. So I left the UK when I was 18 to come over to the States for my undergrad to play soccer, to get my MBA, and ended up staying. So to leave at 18, I can tell you for sure that it wasn't mum's first choice, but she knew it was a good opportunity. So to sort of during that decade from 18 to 28, I'd FaceTime my mum every day. Even when I was going through school, we had such a close bond. And then my parents were divorced, but each of them would come over to the States and we'd go to, all different places around the States. I think I've been to about 48 states now, so really seen, a lot of the country. But, even with that distance, we were just so close, both my mum and my dad, but in particular, my mum. So, those trips that we had, and the memories that we have together were obviously wonderful being on the other sides of the world. But even with that distance, I'd go home every year. We'd spend some quality time together for, birthdays or Christmas. So it was a special relationship.
Yeah. And so your dad, I'm assuming, was diagnosed with cancer first.
Yeah.
When was that?
That would have been, I was about 25. So about 6 years ago. So what was that 2018, 2019?
Mhm. How was that experience for you, being that it was your first parent who was diagnosed with cancer?
Yeah, I think one of the big differences was, as you probably agree, Joe, being sort of younger to mid 20s is a bit different to being sort of closer to 30. You have more experiences in life. You maybe are a bit more mature in the way that you see things. Looking back, I was very naive in the way that I saw the situation with my dad. Now I have a bit more context on cancer, and I've been fortunate enough to be asked to be like a board member on like, several cancer program initiatives. Looking back, I just didn't know. You hear that what the C word, we called it the C word. It's just a scary word. And when I found out, I was just sort of like in shock at first. And I remember being home in the UK when I found out, and I just didn't want to accept the reality. So I very vividly remember going to the pub with my friends. And at the time, I guess alcohol was like, the choice to numb things away. And I just couldn't believe it. And I remember coming back to the States and still being in this like disbelief moment until, reality really sets in. So it was really, really difficult at first.
I'm going to share a quote that I think will make more sense after we hear the rest of this story from you, but I'll throw it out there. It's from Yasmin Mogahed, who said, "Resilience is very different than being numb. Resilience means you experience, you feel, you fail, you hurt, you fall, but you keep going." And it sounds like when you found out about your dad's diagnosis, um, being numb or ignoring or coping, maybe with alcohol and other things was just the easiest, more natural way to go about things. And I'll be curious to hear as we get further into your story and talk about your mom's diagnosis, how that was different for you the second time around. But before we get there, if you don't mind talking about it, what was it like to lose your dad to cancer?
So I didn't lose my dad. I only lost my mum. My dad is now cancer free and in remission.
What?
So yeah, that's it's been a blessing. So that's been fantastic. And that's obviously been, to go back to sort of what you were alluding to, the way I approached hearing about my dad's diagnosis and hearing about my mum's diagnosis, and the way that everything that I did after are contrastingly different. And I think there were some good lessons from, particularly, taking from what happened to my dad.
This is a pleasant surprise for me and also proof that I don't edit the podcast because this is all still in there. I had just assumed because when we had connected and you sent me the video that I watched, it was all about your mom. And I had just assumed that, okay, well, you lost both of your parents. But with that being said, let me ask you a different question.
Sure.
How is your relationship with your dad different now that you're on the other side of all of this?
Oh, it's night and day different. To be very honest, at first when my dad decided that he didn't want to go through quite as aggressive chemotherapy, I was very angry and confused by that. And it really sort of tethered our relationship. We used to be like best friends, going to football and sports together, and we'd even go out, together as friends rather than as son and dad. But when my mum got sick, and we realized that we'd very likely have less than a year out of nowhere, he stepped back up to the man that I recognized before he was sick, and he became like somebody that I could lean on and help me through. Obviously, what I'm sure we're going to discuss became just these moments that are just so dark in my mind. But it really has strengthened the relationship between me and my dad.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, why don't we transition? And so you mentioned your mom got this diagnosis. The timeline was short. Take us to that moment where you learned of her diagnosis and then walk us forward through the journey from there.
Yeah, so we were celebrating her 60th birthday. I was back in the UK, and what she wanted to do was see Paris and Istanbul. So we were on the train to Paris. We were like having a great trip. And I remember on the flight from Paris to Istanbul, she said to me that her shoulder was hurting, and I was, just like, oh, it's fine, mum. Shake it off. We got back to London the next day, so that trip in total was about 5 days. She said, Cal, like, I'm gonna go to the doctors. I remember she left that morning. It was probably about 9 a.m. 10, 11, 12 rolls by. I haven't thought about it. 1, 2 o'clock rolls by, and I start thinking to myself that something's a bit strange here. And she couldn't bring up the um, maybe courage to call me and let me know that they'd basically taken her directly from the doctors to the hospital and informed her that she has cancer, an aggressive form, and probably less than a year to live. So I couldn't quite fathom that that was happening at the time. The next, week or two were just sort of educational, like we're trying to understand what's happening. Unfortunately, it was like a medical error. We spoke about COVID earlier, but in 2020, she had gone to the doctors with a pain in her chest. They do see a small mass in the X-ray, but they put it down to COVID at the time. And that was a whole very unique experience, trying to not be angry, mad, confused, and just try to provide support for my mum.
Mm.
From that day onwards, for the next 9 months, things went downhill pretty quickly. We tried many targeted chemotherapies. All of them provided like really volatile side effects for her. So we had to keep chopping and changing the therapy. I'd gone home almost every month, every other month, back and forth, many flights between that time. And I remember I went home at Christmas of 2023, and she was not doing well. And I remember, and there's a picture of me and her at Heathrow Airport before I flew back to Boston. That was the last hug we ever had outside of a hospital. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, that could be the last time that I fly back from the UK and things are not, in a really bad situation. Super Bowl Sunday, so what, 2 months later, around February time, phone rings. Your mum's been rushed into hospital. It could be less than like 48 hours. How quickly can you get from Boston to London? And I, without even packing a bag, got in an Uber. In the Uber, booked a flight from Boston Logan to London, got on that flight and said to her friend, please just go and whisper in her ear, Cal's on his way, and like hold on. He says to hold on. Um, so I got there, I walked in, obviously she was still there, and I gave her the biggest hug. And that's where things, really went downhill. I had promised her in January of that year that I would run a marathon a month around the world. to show her that I was still in the fight with her. Obviously, that was February, so I was at number two, and we just assumed that she would at least get to maybe October and November sort of time. And yeah, that March, so she was about 3 weeks in the hospital. We didn't make it home. We never made it home from when I arrived, and then she passed away on Mother's Day in the UK, which is March the 10th. So that's how things evolved from the moment of diagnosis, and then obviously the promise that I made was that I would complete those 12 marathons, one per month. Rome was 6 days later, and I don't even remember. I don't remember getting on a flight from London to Italy and running that marathon. There's a picture of me finishing at the finish line. I looked so sick in the face, hadn't really slept, hadn't really eaten, but got it done. And then went on to keep that promise and finish the challenge, last December.
If you don't mind talking about it, Cal, and I know this was in the video that I had watched a bit, but could you talk about the last couple moments and memories that you had with your mom?
Yeah, I can. I wish I could tell you that she was comfortable and not in pain during those 3 weeks. So the first 2 weeks we spent in a hospital. It's a bit different in the UK than in the US. For example, 6 patients in a room separated by curtains. She was probably by at least 40 years the youngest person in the room. And she was really struggling on some nights. So I would sit on this chair next to her bed, just separated by sort of curtains. Can hear all of the other patients. I think the worst moment for me, and I don't want to get too graphic and go into too many details, but um, there was this like priest that came in and basically read like her last rites in front of 6 other people's families, and it was just this really dark moment. And I remember thinking to myself that it can't end like this. It just can't end this way. So I sort of asked around if we could go to some what was called a hospice. It's the same here in the US, where it was very comfortable, but the intention was no longer to fight any cancer or infection, but more comfort for end of life. I'm really glad we got 6 days there. She really enjoyed that. Like all of the nurses would come in and cut her hair and do her nails, and we had some nice moments in those last 6 days. But just seeing that sort of downhill. Also, as sons and maybe people listening as sons or parents, I'm not a parent, but I also thought about uh, what being a parent maybe means. So she knew at my age I'd never been to a funeral. I'd have no idea how to manage that process, and I'd probably be overwhelmed. So with the very sort of small amount of energy she did have, she said, "Oh, someone's going to come and visit today." And I said, "Oh, okay, who?" She'd basically set up the funeral director to come and meet me, and I looked through messages on her phone after, and she was saying, it's close to the end. He's going to be confused. So she was more concerned about me than herself in those moments. And yeah, during the last sort of couple of hours, she seemed to be peaceful. So that's how it ended. And they said to me that at some point you'll take a breath out and won't take one in, and that's where it ended that night.
Oh, I'm yeah, I appreciate you sharing it. I don't know why it made me so emotional the second time. I cried when we talked on the phone as well. I just it's so beautiful how strong she was in those last couple of days and weeks, and how she never stopped being your mom, you know.
Yeah.
It sounds like it would be really hard to just to go through that, but to also have to think about, how to be there. Like she planned ahead, to make your life a little bit easier and more comfortable afterward. Just really beautiful. I appreciate you sharing. And I would be curious, and again, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but if she was listening to this and you could say anything you wanted to her, what would you say?
I would say I'd done it. I would say that I'd done it. She, even in those last moments, she basically said to me, like, again, more worried about me. She kept saying, do not let this break you. Like, you can't let it break you. You have to fly back to Boston. You have to keep doing your job. You must finish the marathon challenge that you're doing. I'll be there in December at the final finish line, just to keep going, like, to not let it break me, to keep that promise. And she said to me, like, we keep that promise. And I had my head down and, like, tears coming down my face. And she grabbed my hand and she, like, didn't have much strength, but she grabbed it pretty firm. She looked at me and she's like, you make sure you keep that promise. And, like, I guess there's two dimensions here. The challenge of the marathons one per month around the world, to get to Rome 6 days later, to come back to the UK in April and do like the funeral and a eulogy and carry her down, and then 2 days later run the Brighton Marathon, just to like get the physical strength and the mental strength to even just get out of bed every morning, let alone get those marathons done. I felt her so close, and all of those. And as the last one came around in December, it was just like nothing was going to stop me. I did the Philadelphia. I think you're based in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
so that's number 11. Yeah, I felt so close in that aspect, and keeping that promise. But honestly, the harder promise was to just on a Monday, Tuesday or Thursday, and you're seeing, everyone just like living this normal life, and you're in this like state of grief and darkness, to just go back to that. I've got a promise to keep. Just find a way, and that alarm goes off, and just even if you're not feeling it, just go and just see what the day brings to you. And I'll be honest, like a lot of the days they weren't pretty. I would maybe get my work done and just try to live a somewhat normal life. Other days were a bit better. I'd find strength from, just keeping that promise. But to answer your question, I would say I'd done it.
Mm. What role has running played in the grieving process for you, Cal?
It's been really interesting. For example, prior to mum passing away, I'd done 2 marathons. So this was March of last year, she passed away. Since that date, I've done 18 marathons, 3 ultra marathons, and next month I'm doing 6 marathons in 6 countries in 6 days, all for cancer research. We've raised, over $50,000, and it's been great. I don't want this to sound like I'm that kind of person that ignores everything and runs. That's not that's not what has transpired. But I will say that I've used running as this mechanism to show mostly the patients. The patients are the ones that I care about most, the ones that have this sort of rare form of cancer that my mum had, that like together we are stronger is basically the way that that
Mm.
we've formed this like narrative. And I might not be in the situation that you're in, but I promise you that one more step. And I think that's why running became really my go-to, or what I sort of navigated towards, because cycling and all of these other endurance sports, which are wonderful and very hard to do, but there's this symbolism with like one more step in running, and that's just what I gravitated towards.
Yeah. I think this is a great place to pause for a second and just for people listening who might not have experience with losing a loved one or anything related to cancer, or and they're just wondering how this all relates to them. In a month from this recording, I'm running up and down the Art Museum steps, the Rocky Steps here in Philadelphia for the second year in a row for 24 hours. And it's to fundraise for cancer patients here in the city of Philadelphia to support them. And I can't help but think it's just such a privilege to be able to do hard things for people who don't get to choose their own hard. And I would be curious if you see running the same way as, when it's hurting, when the marathon is hard, when you might have that inkling or that whisper that you could just stop, Cal, you just quit this, it's getting hard and uncomfortable. If you tap into something greater, something bigger, knowing that there are people out there who are laying in a hospital bed fighting something that they didn't choose.
Yeah. When you see someone that you love fighting, for breath and just for life, it absolutely changes the way that you perceive pain. And for me, I just go back to these sort of memories or snippets of things that I had to see and do when my mum was in her last few hours and few days. I think to myself, not that this is, a walk in the park, I get the opportunity to do this, but I think that I do take myself to that place. That's one of the places that I take myself. The other place is more like belief, and this is not just about running. Um, like I truly believe that doing hard things, be it a run or being a parent, it's really like difficult to do when you don't feel like doing it and it hurts just like in running. And I tap into like those areas of just like believing in myself as well. So I outside of just thinking about the patients and what they're going through, they don't have that choice. And we have that choice to maybe make a difference and push through that pain. And yeah, I think it's pretty special to think that we can make any kind of impact on patients, even if it just means giving them some kind of hope for 5 minutes of their day. So yeah, I saw that you're doing the stairs in Philly.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Uh, there are a couple quotes that come to mind. I'll read one of them. But this one is from Mandy Hale, who said, "Trust the wait, embrace the uncertainty, enjoy the beauty of becoming. When nothing is certain, anything is possible." And I think that in the unknown, in the uncertain, there are a lot of things that can feel scary, a lot of things that can be overwhelming, but there's also a lot of possibility. And it's really cool to see how you've taken this initial journey of uncertainty with your mom's cancer diagnosis and losing her and turn that into the beauty of the unknown. And you're embarking on these endeavors to create good, positive impact. And you don't know where it's going to take you, but you do know that it's going to be worthwhile. And you're putting one foot in front of the other, doing hard things because you trust that and you have faith in that. And I just think that's such a beautiful thing. Um, Part of me also wonders if your answer to the next question is going to be running related. So I'll just ask it and then you can tell me your answer. But we've talked about this hard thing that you did not get to choose. But when you look at your life to this point, Cal, what's the hardest thing you have done on purpose? And why have you done that thing?
This is not running related.
It
Um,
it can oh, so it's not. Okay, it's not
I
running.
mean, everything that is a byproduct of this decision is running related. The 12 and 24 challenge, the 6 marathons in 6 countries in 6 days, they're all running related. But I think the hardest thing that I've had to do or choice that I had to make goes back to I mentioned to you that we were in the hospital and the nurses came to me and they said that you are the next of kin. In other words, if your parent cannot make the decision, they've listed you as the person that needs to make a decision. And the decision I had was we can stay in the hospital with a 10 to 15% chance of prolonging life. No specific time. It could have been 2 days, it could have been 5 days. She could have got out. Or we stop the fight against cancer and we move to the hospice. You have to make a decision, and we need to know by whatever time it was on that day. And I sat there and I thought to myself, I don't know if I can make this choice. I don't know if I can make this choice. I've seen too much pain. She's been in so much pain. I just want her to be in peace and happy, and for our family members to come and see her and obviously see her comfortable. So I chose the hospice option.
Mm.
Um, I'd say that's probably the hardest thing that by, choice I've had to do. And everything since then and what I call the aftermath has a lot of it has been running. So I know that's kind of two parts to your question, but that's the hardest thing that I've actually had to do on purpose.
Yeah. I cannot imagine. I am curious. So we'll get to running here in a second, but is there is there a perspective or a faith that you have that is bigger than life, that bigger than us here on earth, that allowed you to make that decision or gave you some comfort during that decision making process, if that makes sense?
Yeah, yeah. I do practice my faith. There's a particular verse that I like. It's John 13:7. It's like you might not understand now, but you'll understand then. And that doesn't necessarily need to be from like a, religious perspective. If you just, simplify that down to you might not understand now, but you will understand then. I remember thinking to myself, and my mum's mum, who's still alive, by the way, my grandmother, she's very religious, so she made me feel that whatever I chose was the right choice. So I do have that, and maybe it seems strange, but I do definitely think there's for me at least, this like spiritual side to sport in general. I really, really do. When we look at the top level in sport, the common theme between them is there seems to be some belief in something other than just the stadium they're in. There seems to, you see it across all of the sports. So it certainly remains true to me as well. And I just felt that at that time, um, I'd be guided by the powers that be.
Yeah. There's so people listening to this podcast know that I'm a person of faith as well, and there's this story that I don't think I've told on the podcast before. So I'll share it, and then maybe there's something for us to talk about. But it's a fictional story to just make a point. But there was this married couple, and they're adults. They're, let's say, in their late 30s, and the woman all of a sudden goes blind. She has a condition. She loses her sight. Now she has to adjust to that, and it's really hard. She lived her whole life with perfect sight, and now she's lost it. So her husband, who is in the military, he takes some time off of work, and he encourages her. He says, "Hey, listen, we're going to go to the bus together every single day. I'm going to ride with you every single day. I'm going to walk into your office with you every single day. I'm going to sit at your desk with you every single day. And I'm going to help you do your job every single day." So they do that for a couple of weeks, and they ride the bus, they get off, they go in the office. She does her job. She's getting a little bit better at it. Still having a hard time adjusting. And one week, the husband says, "Hey, listen, I've taken a lot of time off of work. They need me. I have to go back. So this week, you're going to have to do it by yourself." And the woman is scared, and she's upset, and it's hard. But she goes to the bus. She gets on, she rides the bus, she gets off, she goes to work, she does her job. It's not pretty, but she's getting it done. So Monday, that happens. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that happens. Friday, she gets off the bus. And as she's getting off the bus driver says, "You're a really lucky lady. Do you know that?" And she says, "What are you talking about?" She's kind of upset. She says, "I'm blind. Can't you see that?" And he says, "Yeah, but every day when you get off this bus, there's a man in a military uniform standing on the other side of the street. And when you get off this bus, he watches you like a hawk. He watches you cross the street. He makes sure you get there safely. He watches you walk in the building. He salutes, he blows a kiss, and then he leaves every single day this week." And she realized in that moment that that was her husband. And he didn't leave her, but instead he was watching over her, making sure she was okay. And the way that story was presented to me, the way that I interpret it as well, is that that was God. Sometimes it feels like we're on our own, and it's scary and it's hard, and we're facing this challenge, and it might feel like God has left us and we're there all by ourselves. But in reality, there's something bigger taking care of us through those hardships and through those adversities. And I just think that's such a beautiful sentiment. And I'd be curious to hear if you have any thoughts as it relates to your life on that.
Yeah, yeah. This is a bit funny actually. So we were on there's about 2 days before the end. She's in a wheelchair at this point. She wanted to go outside one last time just to get the sun on her face. And I said, "Okay." So we're out in the British countryside. The birds are tweeting, and take her around. She's like looking at the sun. She's like, "Take my hand, Cal." So I took her hand. We're not looking at each other. We're both looking up at the sun. She went, "Do you know, like, if I can give you a sign, I will." I went, "What?" but I'm not looking at her. I'm still just looking up at the sun. So what do you mean? She's like, when I'm not here, I'll give you a sign if I can. And I said, like, well, don't half-ass it if you do. Make sure I know that there's nothing that could be like in question here. This was you. So she wrote down on this like piece of paper. This was the next day, and it wasn't necessarily in relation to that situation. She said like, wherever you go, whatever you do, I'll be there with a hug for you with a 1111, like the number. I said, okay, like 1111. That's strange. So like obviously mum passed away, and I hadn't really thought again about the 1111 thing. So we 6 days later is the Rome Marathon, and one of my mum's friends travels over to the Rome Marathon, and I'm running on the course, and we agreed to meet at mile 15. He's not there, so I'm like, I run past mile 15, I look, he's not there. So he's not in the place that he should have been, and he's not there at the right time. So obviously that sequence of events happened for a reason. I see him randomly, like Cal, mile 23, whatever. I'm like, John, let's get a photo. I take my phone out. I turn my music off. I get it out. It's
Oh.
11:11. On the dot, 11:11. I was like, I can't, I just can't. I felt like it was so strange. I said, that was the first time that I'd, felt it. And since that day, like it doesn't happen often, doesn't happen every time, but there's been five or six other instances where 11:11 has like shown up, and it's just, this really strange feeling of you can't write that like that can't be written, so that was like kind of one example, and the other example is just that she left a list on the notes on the iPhone
Mhm.
of either places that she still wanted to go or things that she wanted to do, and there's about 12 on there, and I've done nine since, so it's like, different places in the world or things to do, and one of the places happened to be Lourdes in France. I don't know if you've ever heard of this place.
Mhm.
Basically a place that like pilgrims from like around the world go to. I think like the legend is that like people went there to be like cured. And I was like, "Oh, this is a bit strange," but like I guess she wanted to go for understanding. Went to Lourdes. There's like people from around the world trying to get this water where they believe they're going to be cured. And when I got to Lourdes and I went to this grotto where this famous story had happened, phone out 11:11. I just thought to myself, you can't write that.
That is wild. I'm sure that there are people listening who are thinking, something similar has happened to me. And I just think it's a beautiful sentiment to know that she's watching over you. And I'm sure you'll have many more 11:11 moments through the years. Now, with that being said, I would love to hear a little bit about running. And so you, it sounds like you ran your first two ever marathons that year. And since you've run, you said was it 18 marathons, a handful of ultra marathons, and now you've got all these other plans. What's the hardest race you run so far? We'll start there.
I think the hardest marathon course was Red Rock Canyon in Las Vegas. It was like 16 miles of incline. Like it was ridiculous. That was, real tough. That was actually number one. So she was alive for that one in the challenge, and,
Wow.
FaceTimed after. But the incline on that was insane. I think the hardest like ultra marathon for sure was the San Francisco ultra marathon. You do the actual marathon loop twice, and obviously the hills in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But the hardest part was when you cross the finish line the first time. You, you're like, I just got to do that whole course again. So that was probably the hardest ultra, I think. That broke me.
Oh, and then looking forward, I would love to hear. So the six marathons in 6 days in six countries. What are the countries, and is there a reason why those are the countries?
The reason is logistics.
Okay.
So in order to obviously travel from a country to a country, I didn't want to be spending a lot of time in flights. So the countries are all in Scandinavia. So it'll be Oslo, Norway, which is the final one on the sixth day. It's the official Oslo Marathon. And then the ones that precede that are Stockholm in Sweden, Copenhagen in Denmark, got Helsinki in Finland, we've got Riga in Latvia, and we've got Tallinn in Estonia. So that's yeah, literally a month today that I'll be heading over there to do that, and it's all for cancer research, which is great.
Mm. What will the logistics of that look like in terms of the people around you, the planning that goes into that?
Yeah, so the guy that I was mentioning that came to the Rome Marathon, he'll be there as like a crew member. So essentially, I will be in a hotel. They're in a different hotel. The idea is that we will start each of them at 4 a.m. and I'm going to give myself a 4 to 5 hour block to finish each of those. I've got a 2 p.m. flight each day to the next city. We booked hotels where there's massage, ice, etc., so we can get that done the night before, rinse and repeat, and obviously after the one in Oslo, try and enjoy the moments.
Mm. So I have, I guess, a two-part question, and the second part depends on the first part. So I don't know how your brain works, but if I were planning something like that, I think there would be a small part of my brain thinking, well, what's after that? Does
Yeah.
your brain go there or no?
Yeah, it does. I really struggled after the 12 and 24 challenge because my identity became associated with keeping a promise and getting to the end of that challenge. Like the mundane days throughout last year, difficult days, days that were okay, everything tied back to me finishing that challenge. And when I hit that finish line in London, I was like, I immediately felt it. Great moment. An hour later, I was like, now what? And I think the same will be true after this next one, but it's slightly different now in the sense that I have a bit more purpose in towards driving awareness for, the kind of cancer that my mum had. So it's a slightly bigger purpose and vision. So um, I think I will be thinking about what's next, but not to the same aspect that I did last year.
Yeah. One of the reasons I asked that question is because I think it's very relatable to have trouble being totally present and not thinking ahead, whether that's racing and logistics or something like that, and what's next, or it's just day to day life and being present in this moment, not worrying about what comes up next or the next week or day or month or whatever. And there's a story, again, a fictional story about this man who hires a local guide in a foreign country to climb a mountain, and they get up at midnight and climb for 6 hours. They get up at the top for sunrise, and they're watching the sunrise over this beautiful mountain range. And the man, he notices there are other mountains off in the distance, so the sun is rising, and he starts asking the local guide, do you take people to that mountain out there or this other one over there? And he goes, I would love to book that. Can I book that now with you so that we can secure a spot? And the guy just starts laughing, and he puts his hand on the guy's shoulder and he says, why don't we just enjoy this one first? And I think it's really hard to be present and just enjoy the moment sometimes. And so I'm wondering if that's the same for you, and if you think that'll be a challenge during these 6 marathons, or if it's just so much going on that you'll have no other choice than to be immersed in that experience.
Yeah, I think I'll say two things on this. The first one is that when I do these kinds of challenges, I really try to enjoy it, to make it an adventure and to make the most of it all. Like, I don't want to be in that situation for the reasons that I'm doing these challenges. But when I'm doing them, you'll see it with a smile on my face. You'll see me like chatting to the locals, like really try to enjoy those moments. But with regard to like actually enjoying the moment, if there's one thing, if there's one thing that I had to say is different in my life outside of the obvious, it's my perspective in the sense that before last year when everything went down, I was, well, I'm gonna do this when I've got X. I'm gonna get that when I've got Y. I'm gonna do that next year because this year I'm focusing on this. And well, now I'm focusing on my work and I get a dog in the future. I'll get married. And now I'm so present now in the sense that like this is the moment. Like it's right now because tomorrow could be different. And it's so freeing and liberating to have that outlook now. Not to be stressed by the small things, to enjoy the little things. Um, yeah, I live my life in a very, very different way now. Like you mentioned Dan earlier, the person I was when I met Dan pre-COVID, to who I am now, it's night and day different. I'm just a lighter person.
And what's both encouraging and sad at the same time, I think, is it's encouraging that we can have those perspective shifts. And I
What
think
you're gonna say?
it,
It takes the yeah.
yeah, and even at that, I think those things can fade a bit over time. And my experience with anything someone somewhat related to what you went through, and this is not at all even close, but um probably 2016 or 15, I was in a car accident where my car rolled a couple of times. And it was one of those where time just slows down and you're gripping the steering wheel, wondering, like, am I going to make this? I felt a deep sadness. I don't know if I'll see the people I love ever again. And then the car stopped rolling. I realized I was okay. Someone climbed up on my car, helped me out of the driver's side door, which was up toward the sky. I got to the sidewalk, looked at my car, which was crumpled and crushed and on its side, and I felt around my body, and I was fine. I was 100% okay. And in that moment, I felt what you just described. I didn't care what was in my bank account. I didn't care what I was wearing. I didn't care about anything. I was just so grateful to be on that sidewalk. And for me, that has faded over time. And I wish I could just capture that feeling in a bottle and take a whiff of it every single morning, because it is so powerful. And so I'm curious for you, how do you plan on not letting that fade with time? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I haven't like consciously thought about that question, but what I will say is it's crazy what we can do out of love. Like I can take a list of places around the world. I can go to those places when that person has no idea that I'm doing it, and I can do it. I can run these marathons. I can see life differently. I can raise money for cancer research. And I say it's crazy what we can do out of love, because when the pain is like the pain that I felt when I lost like my best friend, when that pain is like right to your core, I don't actually have to think about it anymore. Of course, there's moments where I get caught up in, maybe a work meeting that stresses you, or your partner, it's something could be very silly, but the speed in which I click out of it now is like very, very quick. And I think that I'm actually not worried about that. I don't think that I'm going to be maybe falling into the old ways again. It's just it goes back to just the pain that hurt so much, an experience that I unfortunately had to live through. And now it's like, what a blessing, man. Like just enjoy it, like dance in the rain, and yeah, do the things that you want to do. That's just my approach to things now. And I used to care a lot about people pleasing, used to worry about it a lot as well, to be very honest. And now, as long as I control what I can, I'm a good person. I really couldn't care less about the rest as much as I used to.
Yeah. And I'm sure in the grand scheme that makes you a much better version of Cal.
Yeah, I think so. I think it also has made me appreciate things that before I didn't even recognize. I shared this in, I think it was right at the end of the challenge in 2024. And I said, like, we did it. And I meant that in the collective term, because like I didn't really know or experience like kindness like it before. Random strangers that either I met on marathon courses, in hotels, they followed the journey, and they sent me messages all year long last year, and I just like realized that um I would never have experienced that before, or even thought about, damn, like these people are actually like nice and like kind for no reason other than just being, decent. I would never have thought about that before, and now I recognize those things, and I'm just glad that I can see clearly now.
Um, It reminds me of episode 139 of this podcast with Callum McCoy. He has a Cherokee background. That's where he comes from. And one of the phrases he shared on the podcast, or the concepts, is that we're all just walking each other home. And I thought that was so beautiful. Like, we're all not going to be here in 100 years. And we're all just doing the best we can, and to be able to be kind and to be there and to support each other as we're walking each other home is really what life is about. And I think it's not until those really dark, hard, painful seasons that we could truly appreciate what it means to have someone else be kind to us or to support us or to be there to lean on. But once you experience that, it changes your perspective and you realize how important it is to be kind, to be there, to support other people, because we are all just walking each other home.
Yeah, 100%. 100% agree.
Yeah. So I would love to hear your thought on the word endurance. Obviously, this is the Project Endure podcast, but when you hear the word endure or endurance, what does that mean to you?
For me, it means whatever it takes. Doesn't necessarily have to be running. It could be, like if you're at work and it's like 3 o'clock and you're a bit tired and you've not, whatever it takes, just to the best of your ability, whatever capacity that you have, whatever it takes. And I remember thinking that to myself through those darker times, in good times. Endurance for me is just like whatever I've got in me is going to be, exerted. And that's really the way that I think about endurance.
And to just go off of that and with the theme of I think this conversation is endurance also boils down to keeping promises to others, but also keeping promises to ourselves. And I think it's a good reminder for all of us that each morning we wake up and we have a set of promises that we get to make to other people, but also to ourselves. And I'm going to show up in this way. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to complete this task. And endurance is stringing those promises together over a long period of time, giving whatever it takes to get there.
Yeah, the confidence that you get from, in my case, looking back and knowing that it would be quite rare that I would have to work through something that we had to last year. But because the promise was kept, you build confidence because you keep the promises that you make to yourself. And it could be the smallest thing. It's like I'm not gonna have a soda tomorrow, or something very simple, right? All the way through to something sadder and bigger. But yeah, the confidence just increases when you continuously keep the promises that you made yourself. And obviously, a little bit about consistency with your running, but yeah, I think the more consistent that we can be with keeping the promises that we make to ourselves and looking after ourselves first, I think we become better people to those around us.
I couldn't agree more. And this is the last question of the podcast. It's also my favorite question, but there are people listening to this who have lost loved ones to cancer even recently. There are people listening to this who just had a season ending injury for their sport. There are people listening to this who are just in a rut and they don't know why. But there are people all over the world who are just going through hard seasons. If you could say anything you'd like to those people right now, what would you say?
Make tomorrow better. I think that phrase or those 3 words,
Mm.
they've like saved me a little bit in the sense that, for example, make tomorrow better could be when I was with mum, just like enjoying that moment, trying to make her better with the medicine that we were working with, all the way through to I'm really out of shape. What decisions can I make today that's going to make tomorrow better? I've got a presentation for work tomorrow. What decisions can I make this evening, going to bed early and not going out, that makes tomorrow better? I am raising research and awareness for this rare kind of cancer that my mum had, making tomorrow better. And I think it just applies to so many different things. And yeah, make tomorrow better became, it just came to me. Like it came to me last year and it's just stuck with me. And it's just so reciprocal across many, many areas of life. So yeah, I would go with that.
It's so simple and yet so profound, and I really appreciate you sharing that because it's applicable right now for me, for you, for everybody listening. I'm sure we can all think of even a few things that would make tomorrow better, and this is your encouragement if you're listening to do those things right now so that you can make tomorrow better. And Cal, if this podcast made someone else better, which I'm sure it did, it made me better, it made me cry. For probably the longest period of crying on my end in a podcast so far, and we're almost at
Sorry.
episode. No, don't apologize. It's what I want. That's what this is about. But if somebody wants to follow along with your journey, support your journey, reach out or connect, what is the best place or places for people to do that?
Yeah, for the running and the cancer research stuff, it will be calrunsformum.com. So it's quite simple. The only thing is the mum is MUM, the British way, not the MOM. And then for Instagram, which is really the only social media that I have, it would be Callum_Cobb. And yeah, happy to connect with anyone.
Amazing. Well, Cal, I will link Instagram and the website down below so people listening have easy access. And I just can't thank you enough for this conversation, for the impact you're making on the world, and for sharing the story that you have. And I'm excited to see how the 6 marathons go and what you have after that. And I'm really looking forward to staying in touch and growing a friendship.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Joe, and good luck on those steps in Philly.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.